Hello and welcome to the day ahead. It is Monday, May the 11th. I'm Andrew Gagan. The local market is set to open the week in the red, with ASX futures down around 0.5% as renewed hostilities between the US and Iran sent oil prices higher, while high interest rates and investor unease about this week's budget are weighing on sentiment. Global equity markets were mostly higher on Friday on earnings optimism, despite fading hopes of a peace deal in the Middle East. And risk sentiment on Wall Street was further buoyed by strong US jobs data. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq again reaching record highs, both achieving their sixth straight week of gains, with the S&P up 8% so far this year and the Nasdaq 13% higher. AI-related stocks led the market higher on Friday, chipmakers leading the way with Qualcomm surging, while Nvidia was also higher, and Intel shares jumped on reports that had reached a preliminary agreement with Apple to manufacture some of the chips that power the iPhone makers' devices. Memory and storage sellers Micron Technology and SanDisk soared, lifted by strong demand from the rapid build-up of AI centres. However, there have been some earnings disappointment. Cloudflare plunging 24% after the cloud services company said it would cut about 20% of its workforce and forecast second quarter revenues slightly below expectations. Trade Desk fell after the ad tech firm forecast second quarter revenue below Wall Street estimates. CoreWeave fell heavily after the cloud infrastructure tech company raised the lower end of its annual capital expenditure forecast. And online travel platform Expedia dropped after it flagged that the conflict in the Middle East was hurting demand. Well, President Trump has rejected Iran's response to a US proposal for peace talks to end the war, posting on social media, "I've just read the response from Iran's so-called representatives. I don't like it. Totally unacceptable." Meanwhile, the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait say they have intercepted hostile drones despite the ceasefire remaining in place. And in the US, employment increased last month more than expected, with April's non-farm payrolls rising by 115,000 jobs, which has reinforced expectations that the Federal Reserve will keep interest rates unchanged as the war fuels inflation. Household employment decreased for a fourth consecutive month, but was offset by a continued contraction in the labour force, keeping the unemployment rate unchanged at 4.3%. US Treasury yields fell following the payrolls report, the US 2-year falling at 3.89%, the 10-year at 4.35%. Australian 3-year government bond yields were around 4.65%, the 10-year close to 5%. The US dollar index was down slightly on Friday, the Aussie at 72.3 US cents. Well, Brent crude futures jumped as much as 3% on Friday as the US and Iran renewed hostilities, but paired gains as traders hope for a longer pause in the fighting that has shut the shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Brent crude futures settling at around $101 a barrel. Gold managed to lift with the spot price at around $4,715 an ounce. Copper was up 2%, iron ore unchanged, $112 a tonne, and Bitcoin is trading above $81,000. Well, ahead this week, locally, tomorrow we get Westpac's monthly read on consumer confidence and NAB's April business survey. The key event will be the federal budget to be handed down tomorrow night, with the focus on expected changes to tax on investments. Wednesday, we get the wage price index for the past quarter. And overseas, today China releases its consumer and producer inflation data. Tuesday, a confirmation vote on US Fed Chair nominee Kevin Warsh is expected, and US inflation data is released. Thursday, UK GDP growth, and at the end of the week, President Trump will meet Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing. That is your weekend. See you again tomorrow.